And okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fathering Through Recovery. It's a panel conversation hosted by Fathering Together. And we've got a great crew to share about their experiences, a really honest and frank dialogue that we're about to present to you all. So at Fathering Together, for those of you that have not yet watched a panel or been involved with us, we are all about building a community of healthy fatherhood and providing resources and honest portrayals and stories of what fatherhood means to all of us. We're a diverse network of about 125,000 global members, and we're really all about affecting that change in the world. We're a 501c3 organization, newly minted, so to speak, and we're excited to present this panel and many more to come. So if you aren't following us or are unaware of some of our panels, check us out on Facebook at Fathering Together. You can also join some of our groups. Our two big groups are Dads with Daughters and Dads with Sons. Once you join those groups, we have a host of subgroups, including the one that is most involved with this panel, our Dads in Recovery group. And we welcome you to our community if you so choose. But without further ado, I will hand things off to Shaun Meier, who is an amazing dad who I got to meet a few weeks ago and helped me pull this motley crew of amazing dads together. So I will turn things over to him. I will bow out so you don't have to see my face anymore. And I hope to return at the end to give a thank you. But I will thank you all right now and wish you well for this great conversation. Bye all.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for everyone that's joining us. You know, Brian asked me a week or two ago if I'd be willing to help out with this. And man, I four guys jumped into my mind right away. People who I respect their recovery, I respect their fatherhood, I respect them as men. You know, luckily 3 out of the 4 were able to make it. One of the gentlemen, he wasn't unfortunately able to make it last minute. But these are all guys that have really kind of taken the whole recovery fatherhood thing and really meshed it well. You know, and you see it in their lives. You see it when you see them with their kids. You see it when they're out doing their thing. So without further ado from me, I figured we could all just kind of go around and get started. Everyone's going to just kind of give a little introduction to themselves and kind of talk just a real quick story of the recovery. Kale, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Kale, and I'm definitely an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 7th of 2011, and I am the father of a 13-year-old going on 23 with the eye rolls and the attitudes. I'm also recently divorced, so trying to navigate the co-parenting and a 13-year-old girl at the same time. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Kale. Next up, let's go around the square. We'll hit up Cody next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cody, alcoholic. So my sobriety date's July 14th. 2017. Recently celebrated 3 years a few months back. So I'm one of the fathers on here that's I wasn't a father until I came into recovery. So that's why I've been looking forward to this group, because I can also learn from the other fathers as well. My son is 4.5 months old, and man, I tell you what, they say you'll see yourself in your children. I see that every day, and I'm like, oh man, oh no. But yeah, it's been a blessing, and yeah. So I guess I will pass it off with that.
All right, cool. Thanks, Cody. How about you, Shane?
What's up, guys? I'm Shane. I'm an alcoholic. Sobriety date's February 6th of 2016. So longest I've ever been sober, 37 years old. I have 5 kids. I have an 18-year-old son, a 13-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old son, and they're all from my ex-wife from my previous marriage. I'm married. I am since remarried, and me and my new wife had 2 babies last year. We had a little boy on February 2nd and a little girl on December 2nd. So I sort of got what Cody said. I'm a little bit different because I had 3 kids while in active alcoholism, and now I have 2 babies while I'm sober, and I can definitely see I missed a lot of stuff back then. So just happy to be here and happy to support this whole thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Well, as I said, my name is Shaun Meier. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Also recovering from heroin addiction. I'm with you, Kale. I got a 6-year-old daughter who she's going on about 24, 25 years old. You know, she's getting the attitude. You know, dealing with the whole co-parenting thing. I have full custody of my daughter, and currently, mom's another one who suffers from this disease. She's currently in rehab. You know, so it's a whole nother set of challenges. How do you explain to a 6-year-old, you know, the disease that daddy has and mommy has? You know, it's funny, Cody. You talked about seeing yourself and your kids, and I swear sometimes she'll be drinking her milk, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're drinking that milk too fast. Don't you slow it down? You know, we see this, and all of a sudden, especially all of us work in the recovery industry, you just see it constantly. You know, but it's really cool to see all you guys here and seeing how the recovery affects your fatherhood. So with that being said, you know, I said I kind of gave you guys all the warning. We're just kind of have a real casual conversation here. So what do you guys think? How do fatherhood and recovery affect each other? You know, I think about myself and in my own situation. A big part of my recovery is that whole acceptance piece. Acceptance that things are going to happen the way they're going to happen. You know, and that for me is something that I have translated into being a dad. You know, I got this little 6-year-old human that I can't affect the way she's going to do a lot of stuff. You know, I can kind of guide her. I can give her little nudges here and there, but at the end of the day, she's 6 and she's going to do what she wants to do. She's strong-headed, you know? And it's kind of the whole in recovery, we talk about, you know, I can't teach you. I can just be the change that I want to see. You know, I can allow my actions be influential. And that's how I kind of go about my fathering is I don't try to teach her how to do, or I don't tell her what to do. I try to provide that role model for her and show her that way. So what do you guys think? How do kind of recovering and fatherhood and recovery, where's the parallels in them? How do they affect each other?
So I'm Shane. I'm an alcoholic. What I've noticed, I guess I haven't. What I notice now with my 2 youngest kids is that recovery. I'm able to sort of give them everything they need right now, and I don't mean like just materialistic things, but more just to be there to like watch their personalities grow and to be a part of their interactions throughout the day, and to like come home from work and be excited to see them and not be hungover or run down. And you know, so I've definitely noticed that part. And then with my oldest, you know, he just turned 18 on St. Patty's Day, and you know, I maybe had about 3 years sober, and he came to me and told me that he smoked weed, and it was crazy because I didn't tell him. It wasn't like my parents told me, like, don't do drugs. What I told him was like, okay, you know, that was a decision you made. And just because of my recovery and like the facts that I've learned about myself, I was able to sit down and talk to him like he was a grown up, you know, and not get mad at him and not yell at him, but just sort of point some facts out, right? And point some things to like, you know, to potentially watch out for, and things like that. So I think most definitely my recovery has strengthened the way I communicate with my older children, like a lot, because I can sort of, you know, I'm at the day and age where I don't force anybody to do anything. Like, hey man, this is my experience with it, and I believe sometimes, even though they're my kids, sometimes, you know, that people have to have their own experiences. So, like I said, with my 2 youngest ones, haven't really noticed too much as far as, I guess the one thing, you know, recovery has to be selfish, and we hear that sometimes, and you know, sometimes at work a lot, and then come home and try to get some family time in, and then meetings and H&I and things like that. And you know, there are some days where maybe I might not even see my 2 little ones. So I go to work and they're sleeping. When I come home, they're sleeping. So that's rough. But so I have to constantly try to work on that balance too. So that's all I got. Thanks.
I'm Cody. I'm an alcoholic. So this has kind of been like a really big deal for me over the last few months. You know, early in my recovery, and throughout my entire life, all I had to worry about was myself. And I struggled doing that, obviously. So you know, starting a family in recovery, it's been one of the best but most trying experiences I've ever had. But man, it's easy for me to kind of, throughout the day, working with other alcoholics and stuff, to practice my program of recovery and try to live by the principles. But sometimes I struggle coming home with that, because I come home with all that, that weight on me still. So I've been focusing on trying to like carry the principles of my recovery into my home life as well, and making sure that I allot time for my family, because I'm with you, Shane, and probably the other two guys, where we work a lot, and I try to make sure that I'm there and I'm present for these moments that are happening, and and I'm emotionally available, and I'm not run down. But also, it's helped me in my relationship as well, because it's a big change for both of us. But I tell you what, it's amazing that I have the awareness today to see, maybe negative behavior patterns in my home life. And I have the awareness to be able to notice that and reach out to other, men in the recovery and my sponsor and things like that, and discuss these kind of things that I'm going through. And I'm not alone. And Shane, I've seen you for a while. I've seen the father you are in recovery, and it was a good role model for me, as well, because I've seen the dad that you've become, since, and it's been good.
Thanks, Cody.
You're welcome, Shane.
So I'm Cale. I'm still an alcoholic, and this is a pretty interesting question, given the point I am in my marriage and the dissolving of the family. I'm in recovery and I'm an alcoholic, but her mother she claims she's a normie. But I can see the isms in my daughter, and I could see the dynamics that caused my divorce between my wife and I. Now I see them between my daughter and her mother. And I have to, it's that whole saying about in the rooms that you hear all the time, sometimes you could just be the best big book you can for people and not beat them over the head with it. And I try to be consistent with my daughter. I try to give her an outlet to talk about these things. But at the end of the day, I am programming her to accept behavior from the men in her lives by the example that I set when I deal with her mother. And that's the truth. In the end of my marriage, the last 2 years were hell on earth. And aside from being an alcoholic and an addict, I'm also a veteran, and I have some PTSD issues that I needed to have addressed, which I did through outside sources, just like it says in the big book. But her mother didn't get that. And her mother is the only person on the earth that can trigger my PTSD as bad as it is. And then I used to think that was like, oh, she's doing it to me, and it's all, but now that I see this interaction with my daughter and her, I realize it's got nothing to do with me. I was reacting to that trigger, but that's her, and that's her stuff that she has to deal with. Having said that, I have to, again, be the best big book I can for my daughter and be consistent and not let this, like if I had relapsed because I got divorced, what kind of message would that have sent to my daughter? Like things get hard and you quit? I mean, that's not what the program is about. The program is about no matter what happens in my life, there is a toolkit that's been laid at my feet. I've chosen to pick it up, and now I have to engage with those tools to stay sober. So I got a new sponsor. I mean, this COVID thing is killing me because I am an A-type person. I miss interacting with people. Before I got sober, and don't touch me, right? Don't put your hands on me. We're going to fight if you put your hands on me. And then I got sober in meetings, man, I miss people hugging me. I do. That's the weirdest thing. I never thought in like 15 years I would ever say something like that. But I do. I miss hugs, and I miss the interaction with people. And I miss like the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting. You don't get that with Zoom meetings. I mean, you can to a certain point, but I say all to say that as my daughter matures at 13, because when I mean, I'm 51 years old. Some of the things that she's dealing with, I didn't have to deal with until I was 15 or 16. These kids are dealing with it 10, 11, 12, 13, like now. Kids are drooling and they're like doing CBT oil and, you know, all this crazy stuff that, so all I can do is be that best example for her. And she knows. I used to take her to AA meetings. My home group had a nursery, right? So it was open to families. So she knows people in the program. I also volunteered on the west side of Columbus, devastated by the opiate crises. But there was a homeless outreach that I went every Friday night. And about a quarter of the time, I would bring her with me. So she would see people in active addiction and see people that were drunk. I mean, she was 10, 11, 12 at the point, but she knew, you know, and she was kind to those people. She treated them like people, not like they're broke or they had. So that's what I try to do without like pointing fingers and telling her what to do. Like it was like, I think Shane said, like, I can't make you do anything. All I could do is lead by example. I'm sorry, I got a little off topic. Sorry about that.
That's all right, Kale. I appreciate it, man. You segued me into our next question. But before we get there, you know, I just wanted to throw out there that you know, all of us, we're all in recovery. We're all involved in the recovery industry. So we kind of throw some lingo around there that people who aren't involved, they might not understand. So, you know, when we talk about the big book, that's the main textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous. That kind of becomes our guide to living, you know. And Alcoholics Anonymous, a big misconception is that the final goal of AA, of working the 12 steps, is to stop drinking. It's not. The final goal is to become a better person, become closer to a God of your understanding, you know, and putting down the drinking and the drugs is kind of a big deal, big part of that. But so if we kind of I'm trying to, when we throw some terminology out there that people might not understand, I'm trying to just kind of fill you guys in with that. But Kale, you said a couple great things there. That being a good example, that's something that I think of every day. You know, my daughter's going to grow up and see the way that I treat women, and that's going to be her example. That's what she's going to look for. You know, and it's only because of my sobriety today that I'm able to be a good person. You know, I look back on the wreckage of my past, and I was abusive. You know, I took advantage of women. You know, maybe not physically, but emotionally, and I just took what I needed and got what I needed. Today I'm learning to be a healthy part of a relationship, you know, and that's something that takes time, you know, and it's teaching our kids of how to be a good part of a relationship and how to not get into those toxic relationships. You know, something else you kind of talked about there, Kale, and I said, segued me into the next question perfectly, is you talked about bringing up your daughter to meetings. And I'm the same. My daughter, I was actually sober when she was born, and then unfortunately I relapsed for a little bit, and I'm sober again today. She's grown up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to a point of where actually at my home group, she is she's the treasurer. She walks around with the basket every week and collects the money. You know, for me, that's a big thing for me, for her to understand that this is where daddy goes for help. You know, because it is, like I said, myself, I'm an alcoholic. Her mom's an alcoholic. You know, there's a chance that maybe one day she becomes that. I want her to know that there's a good place for people to go. And I also want her to know that just because somebody has a problem doesn't make them a bad person. Being 6 years old, she doesn't really know what we're doing there. You know, she has an idea there that people there have had problems and people there used to like to drink. She doesn't understand all of it though. But she does know that the people in those rooms, the people in those meetings are nice to her. She knows that those people are smiling, those people are happy. So kind of how do you guys involve your kids in your recovery? And if you've made the decision not to, you know, why do you choose not to involve your kids in your recovery?
All right. Hi, I'm Shane. I'm an alcoholic. I want to apologize to you guys for eating while we're doing this. I just got off of work. My wife made dinner. If I don't eat the dinner that she made, then we're gonna have a whole nother issue. So sorry about that. So I don't know. For me, it was almost natural to sort of invite my kids into my recovery. You know, like even with my older two. Or my older three children, like my oldest son, for example, he knows to an extent, right? You know, I never sat down and specifically told him in detail. But when I got sober and I got out of treatment and I started slowly reintegrating myself back into the household from 3-quarter living, which is just a recovery house. You know, I told him, I said, Dad was really sick, man, and but I'm getting better, and I met a lot of guys that are helping me, and you're welcome, you know, to come and meet some of these guys. These are my new friends, and you know, after the first couple months, and then 6 months, and then 9 months, and then a year, and it was like the support group that I had built and the people that I hung out with on a daily basis were all part of that same program. It was almost inevitable that my kids were meeting some of them guys. Today, the gentleman who used to be my sponsor, he's one of my best friends still today, Tony G. He's at a Youngstown, Ohio, super good guy. And my kids call him Uncle Tony, you know. So it's just really cool. And I remember when I was still in the previous marriage and I'd be getting ready after work or something. And I remember my kids would be like, Dad, you going to a meeting? We're coming with you. We're coming with you. And that's all right, cool. And they started making friends too, because there was other people that would bring their kids there. And I mean, they really liked it, and they know what it is, and they know what I'm doing. Like I said, to an extent, right? Uh, and then my son, my 18-year-old, he came over to stay the night one night. This was about 6 months ago, and I said, yeah, you can come over. I'll come get you, but I got to do H&I tonight. And he said, I'll just come with you. So it was cool because I got to take him into the facility with me, and I got to tell the people, like, hey, this is my son. You know, if anybody objects to him being here, you know, we can fix it. Nobody minded, but it was cool because I got to tell my story of like all the horrible things that I had exposed him to. And then I got to show, like, with just a couple years of sobriety, like I have a relationship with him again. And like, I mean, it was really touching. It was a powerful H9. And like, yeah, so basically my life is an open book today. And, you know, there's some details that you share with certain people. And if my son ever sat down and asked me, you know, specific details, I feel like I would almost have to tell him, but I feel like the more he knows, the better testimony it is today for him to be like, you know what, man, my dad made it through some crap. Right. And he found a new way of life. So no matter what he goes through, maybe hopefully I can be that role model for him and my other children too. Thanks.
Shane. It's kind of cool when they get to that point where to them it's another thing. They get so used to it. You know, I know my daughter Piper, she gets excited when we go to meetings. I got my regular group of people and she says, are we going to Nate's meeting tonight? Are we going to Chagrin meeting? I mean, she knows them. She knows who's going to be there. You know, and she gets excited to get involved.
Yeah, I on the other hand, since my child is small and, you know, born in the heart of this COVID pandemic, I'm with Shane. Like, you know, I believe I'll be doing this to the day I die, and I'm fine with that. So therefore, you know, when the time comes, sure, you know what I mean. I'll definitely expose my child to, you know, the recovery atmosphere, because those people are part of my lives. But a big part of it too is making sure, since, you know, he is young and we don't want to expose him to a bunch of people, I make time for her to be able to, you know, do her recovery as well, because, you know, as a mother, it's got it. I know it's tough on her, you know what I mean? So that's where, you know, my recovery really comes in there, is making sure I make time for my own recovery and help her have time for her own recovery as well.
So I chose to get my family involved with my program pretty early, probably 6 months into my into my initial recovery. And I found this meeting that was around the corner from my house on a Saturday night. It was 5 o'clock, had a sitter, and it was open. It was a mini lead with a discussion. So I thought it would be good for my wife to be able to hear from other alcoholics and their families how they deal with it. And my daughter got to the point where she, like Shaun was saying, she was looking forward to it. There was days, it was Saturday, it was warm out, I just cut the grass, it's summertime. I don't want to go to a freaking meeting on Saturday night. Come on, man, it's 5 o'clock. And Lexi was getting ready. She's like, what are you doing? Let's go. You need to get in the shower. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're going to be late. I'm like, what? She's like 6. So we were steady in that. That was my home group for about 4 years. And Lexi, I got sober. She was like 2.5. So she was about 6, and somebody asked her about the meetings. Like one of her family are Quaker. They're from Southern Ohio. They don't quite get alcoholism or, recovery or 12-step. And they asked Lexi about the meetings because she found out, she brought it up at like Thanksgiving or something. And they're like, what? They asked her, and she said, well, those are the meetings that help daddy be a better daddy. And I'm standing in the kitchen hearing this. She can't even see me. I just started bawling. I mean, that killed me, right? I wasn't prompted. It wasn't, it was a genuine 6-year-old, the voice of God coming out of a 6-year-old. And that broke my heart. And, I never relapsed after that. I relapsed at one point. I mean, I went back out on the marijuana maintenance program. I didn't drink. There's my justification. I didn't drink. But I restarted my calendar on February 7th of 2011. And this was, the following year. So it must have been 2008, 2007, Thanksgiving. And she said that, and I'm like, there's nothing that's ever going to make me drink again. I mean, there is really, that would break that kid's heart, right? That would disappoint her. So I got sober for them, but I stayed sober for me. And I need to be real clear about that. I did. I wanted my family back, and I will be perfectly honest, but I quit drinking because I wrecked that. That was a train wreck that I caused. And I got them back, and I worked on that, but I stay sober for me so that I can hear in my head my daughter say that when her little 6-year-old voice. I pass.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kale. I know Piper does the same thing. It's she gets so excited, and she doesn't know how many times that there's been where you're right. I didn't want to go, but she's like, I know they got donuts at this meeting, so we're going tonight. And I'm like, all right, fine, let's go. And then I'll pick her up. We had this meeting that before COVID we go to every Friday night, and I pick her up at daycare, and as soon as she leaves, she tells the daycare people, I'm going to a meeting tonight, and the people are looking at me like I'm crazy because they have no clue. And I'm just like, yeah, we are, absolutely we are tonight. Cody, some stuff you were talking about, kind of brought up some other good things. First of all, I know you got the baby now, and it is weird with COVID, but somebody told me once, because I used to always get so scared when Piper was a baby, I'd be bringing her, and she'd make a little peep, or she'd giggle, or she'd cry, and like I'd panic, and I'd like get her up and get her out of the meeting and stuff. Somebody sat me down once. They said, listen, man, if someone's got a problem with your baby, it's their problem, not yours. You need to be here just as bad as them. Now if she started going off, absolutely go in the other room, but a little giggle, little laugh, little cry, it is what it is. People like seeing that. But something else you kind of talked about, you talked about you and your lady, how you guys have to kind of sacrifice, how you guys have to make adjustments. I know that's a big thing today, especially with COVID, and we all have jobs and we all have kids, we're all doing this stuff. Where do you make adjustments in your life? Where do you make sacrifices? How do you feel about those sacrifices? I remember when Piper started kindergarten, I used to go to a 7 a.m. meeting every single morning, 7 days a week. Well, she started kindergarten. Now all of a sudden I couldn't go to that meeting. And there was a little bit of feeling of resentment originally of like, man, I can't go to my 7 o'clock meeting anymore. But it took a day or two of like really sitting back and reflecting and being like, okay, I'm not going to this meeting because this little girl depends on me, because I'm in this girl's life today, because I'm doing this for this little girl. So I found today that my life is full of adjustments. My life is full of sacrifices. There's so many times where, it's Friday night tonight, man. There's tons of stuff I could do, but this is something that I need to do to get out there. And if nothing else, this right here is helping me stay sober tonight. This is making sacrifices for my own recovery. So where do you guys all see these sacrifices happening? How do you guys have to adjust your life both ways? Adjust your recovery for being a dad and adjust being a dad for your recovery.
So
Great question. Go ahead.
go ahead, Shane.
You sure?
Yep.
Great question, Shaun. And I guess I guess I've noticed it in my everyday life, but when you just sort of brought that up, it made me really think. And I've had to sacrifice a lot of my recovery for my family. And so now there's some basic things that I do, right? There's my proverbial medicine that I take every day, and the basic things that I do, my prayer, my working with guys, my going to meetings. But at the beginning, man, I basically lived in meetings. If I wasn't in a meeting, I was at any random recovery house that I could just stop in at. I probably sponsored 3/4 of Warren at one point in time. It was like, it was a lot. And then the kids, and I got to start sacrificing. All right, let me take a little bit of this away, take a little bit of that away. And I remember not even too long ago, maybe 6 months ago or something, my wife was like, hey, you think I can get any of your time? Like, I don't know, can we see you for a little bit? And I'm like, yeah, but I got this meeting. I gotta go do this H&I. I gotta go meet with this guy, getting the steps. And so really what I had to do was try to not look at my recovery family balance in a 24-hour period, but almost more what I try to do is look at it in like a week period. So I make sure I keep one day designated for like, meeting with guys, at H&I, things like that. I try to keep that to 1 or 2 days a week. Work is usually 5 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week. And then I have my day for family, is designated for family. And, and I've had, like I said, I've had to sacrifice probably a lot of my, if I didn't have a family, if I was a single guy, I'd probably be at a meeting somewhere right now, probably be seeing what's up at the 3/4 house, things like that. But I don't think that's a bad thing, though. And when I say sacrifice, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. But it's like my recovery has given me my life back, right? So now I have a life and I'm able to live that today. So as long as I designate some time to that recovery, and as long as I do the things that keep me well on a daily basis, then I continue to have all these other things, and I guess that's about all I got. Thanks.
Okay.
You said a lot of good stuff there, Shane. I mean, because that's kind of like, I guess, without even realizing it, that's kind of what I've been doing. Like, I kind of like look at my weeks on a weekly basis. Like, okay, she knows that usually Wednesday and Thursday are my later days where I do H&I, and that usually I'm not coming home till late. And on the weekends, I try to designate that, like, what did you want to do? What is there anything you've been wanting to do all week that you've been waiting for? You know what I mean? And usually, being a new mother, she wants to go to the gym and, exercise and things like that. And I try to be there to let her do those things that she's unable to do during the week, really. And as far as my recovery goes, a lot of the guys I work with in recovery, they're aware of my situation as being a father, and they're perfectly okay with setting up time, and if I set a certain time, I have to stick to that, because I don't have the leeway that I used to. What I mean, where I could kind of just come and go as I please. But for me, as far as my recovery goes, the biggest part was I started kind of reaching out in different avenues of recovery as well, and tried to broaden my horizon of what recovery actually can be. Obviously Zoom, that's been a wonderful thing. She gets on her meeting, I get on my meeting. My little dude, he's there doing his thing. We can kind of, co-parent, and everything works out fine. We both get our meeting in, and that's a beautiful thing. But also, I try to think of it as, like being a good family member, being a good father, being a good significant other. That speaks in recovery in volumes as well. You know what I mean? That, because essentially it's about carrying these principles in all our affairs. Who am the person I'm being when I'm at home? Does she get the tired, worn out Cody, or am I going to see what I can pack to enrich her life and my child's?
Cody.
So this is a really weird question for me, just because I'm in this transition phase of my being divorced. I mean, officially I'm divorced on September 11th. I go in front of a judge, so via Zoom. So I'm really trying to redefine like what my recovery looks like in the age of COVID. I mean, I have asthma, and so that makes me more susceptible to catching COVID. And I'm 51. I mean, all these markers. I stick with the Zoom meetings. Now, prior to this, when my marriage was going down the toilet, I was in meetings. So the arc of it was I got sober, did 90 and 90, did another 90 and 90, did another 90 and 90. So my first sponsor was the CEO of the group home I grew up in. And I used to say that he saved my life when I was 15, and he saved my life again when I was 40. And he's old school. This guy is now 83 or 84. And his sponsor was Jeremiah from the first 25. Jeremiah was the first Native American in AA. And my sponsor is Native American, well, my grand sponsor, my first sponsor. And Jeremiah's sponsor was Bill W. So he did not play. It was straight out of the big book, right? And don't talk about drugs, right? Don't, this is AA. So he told me to do 90-90. And then he told me to do another 90-90 and told me to do another 90-90. So I was in meetings all the time. That's why I incorporated the Saturday meeting in with my family. Because like Cody, I tried to have a balance. And like Shane, I mean, I was like the first 3 years, I had 5 sponsees at one point. I was 2.5 years sober. What could I offer? But you know what? Kept me sober. And then I got to the point where, I was working a lot, and, I felt like I got my legs underneath me, and I had a sponsor tell me, like, find your balance, like find where, what's the minimum amount of meetings that you could go to without the squirrel starting running your head. And so for me, that was 3 meetings a week, but I had to call my sponsor every day, right? Just to check in, no texting like a 12-year-old girl. I want to hear your voice. So, and that worked for a while. And then when I started addressing my PTSD and things went sideways with my wife, my sponsor moved to Texas. I had to find a new sponsor. For a while there, I was sponsoring myself, and I had to fire that jerk because he was not good. And but I was in meetings every day. And at one point, like 4 years in, when I was sponsoring all those dudes, my wife said, you're like 4 years sober now. Aren't you done with meetings? Didn't you like graduate? I'm like, oh no. I mean, can't you like not go to meetings anymore? Aren't you good? And I knew that should have been a red flag long before all this went sideways. So I went back to like going to meetings all the time, but I found my motivation was different when I was going to meetings all the time when my marriage was going sideways, because I started looking at the 2-legged dope, and I was like, So I checked in with my sponsor, like, you just go to men's meetings. That's it. Nothing else. No co-ed meetings. So that worked. But now, like, I live in Athens, Ohio. I'm going to OU at 51 in a master's program, and I can't leave. The whole town is shut down. They don't let anybody on campus. I can't get involved with the collegiate recovery community. I mean, so my whole life is Zoom, but I'm back to having an old school, one of the first Cleveland people, AA, and he bust my head. Right? He's 50 something years sober and he didn't put up with my stuff. I start whining to him, hey, what are you doing? And I kind of need that right now, especially since I've been in the program for a minute, because it's easy to like rest on your laurels and like, oh, I got this, man. That's the worst thing an alcoholic could ever say in AA. I got this, because that means that you're headed for a relapse. I went off again. I'm sorry.
It's all right, Kale.
Can I share, Shaun, you mind if I share something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
So I think what while sort of listening to these other guys share, what came out to me, like I talked about a lot of sacrifice that I made recovery wise for my family, but I think it's very important to share with everybody that's maybe tuned in right now that there's also been other times where I've had to sacrifice my family for my recovery. Kale just said it, when them squirrels start racing, boy, it doesn't matter, how bad the wife wants to see me, maybe I haven't seen, what, I got to get to a meeting. I got to go meet with this guy, whatever the case may be. And there has been some times, when I'm feeling like, hey man, maybe it's not enough right now, where I have to step that up too. And I almost have to sacrifice parts of my family for my recovery. But I believe it comes and goes. It comes and goes. So I just try to pay attention to myself, how I'm feeling, how I'm acting to those around me. And sometimes I have to sacrifice some recovery for my family. And sometimes I have to sacrifice my family for some recovery. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. So I know we're kind of running out of time here. Our hours starting to come up quick. But I just kind of wanted to go around the horn here and just kind of give some, what we're all really good at is give some words of wisdom. I'd like to everybody kind of give a shout out some words of wisdom, and then let's also kind of throw out there just some ways to get involved with recovery communities. I know that there's a couple. We can talk about intergroups. We can talk about NA World Services, all sorts of stuff. Maybe I can even send Brian a couple links that he could throw up on the page after we're done. But just what are your suggestions? Someone either looking to get into recovery, someone new into recovery, somebody maybe who's dealing with their wife or girlfriend who's going into recovery. How do we deal with this on a daily basis?
Go ahead, Cody.
I'm sorry.
You were looking. I was like, So I guess for me, like the best words of encouragement I can get are if you're sober and you're still actively working on bettering yourself and your recovery and your family, you're winning. You're doing it. I mean, it's easy to get caught up on maybe this aspect or this aspect or this aspect could be better. That just means you're working a good program in recovery. So, progress is progress, and the best way that I seem to get plugged in is I stay active in my recovery community. I listen for opportunities to be of service because, just like any of these guys will tell you, I mean, service was the biggest part of my recovery. Going to and doing H&I, going to the sober houses, talking with the new guys. Not only one, is it entertaining, two, it fills them with hope as well as you, I mean, and helps really remember where I came from and why I got the fire in me for recovery that I do today. And, also like even just something as far as like on social media, I learned so much about different recovery groups, different recovery communities, different functions. And, I follow all those pages and that gives me a lot of good insight on a lot of, good recovery fairs and outreaches and things like that are good to attend, and they're great for taking a new guy there too as well. So, I appreciate everyone listening. I'll pass it off to Shane since he was so eager.
All right. So, I want to thank Cody and Kayla and Shaun and Brian for allowing us to do this. I'm not sure exactly what time it is, but just thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this. And uh, so resources. I think at the beginning. I'm from the Youngstown area, so Youngstown and Warren, and there's a huge recovery movement out here, and I'm sure it's different in other places, and I'm sure there probably are some places where it's harder to find meetings than it is in other places. But for example, we have a Sahara Club in Warren, and before pre-COVID, there was 26 to 30 meetings there a week. So you could go there virtually any time of the day or night, and there'd be somebody there, and there'd be a meeting about to start or just started or about to end. And then in Youngstown, we have Fellowship Hall, and another 25, 30 meetings a week. You could go there any given time. So what I try to do is stay around recovery hubs like that. So in my community, try to figure out, like, all right, where are some meetings happening, right? Because I want to get involved in it. And my suggestion, I guess, to anybody sort of newer in recovery, please don't be scared when you go to a meeting to stand up and say, "Hey, I'm new," and I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing. So any help would be greatly appreciated. And you got guys like me and like Cody and probably like Kale and like Shaun that will approach you after the meeting and say, "Hey man, what's up? This is where we sort of all meet up, or we go get coffee before the meeting," and just start to build a community, a recovery community up around you. And then there's always the main ones. You got the area intergroups, and then like Shaun was sort of saying at the beginning, you can always get online and find, type in your zip code and stuff, and it'll show you where everything is around you. And then sort of like Cody shared too, being of service. So another thing that I also did was run around recovery centers, like in or around my area, and just say, "Hey, this is my name. This is how long I have sober. Is there any way I can come in and share with these guys a little bit?" And do things like that, and it just widens the circle more and more and more till you get to a point like today where the only people I interact with are people in recovery for the majority of my life. You know what I mean? So I hope that answered the question. Thanks.
So my piece of advice is a little different. Is first time I ever walked into an AA meeting, I was 16, and I was living in the group home, and they caught me with weed and told me to go to AA, and I hated it. Everybody was old, and that was back when you could smoke, and like the whole room was full of cigarette smoke. It was awful. Couldn't stand it. And then when I was in the Navy, I got busted for drinking, and they sent me to an aversion program, sent me to AA again. Same deal. Hated it. Couldn't stand it. People are stupid. What the heck is this? So my advice is, if you go to an AA meeting and you don't like it, there are hundreds of AA meetings all through every city. Try another one. I mean, if you spend half the effort you used to getting drunk or getting your fix on your recovery, you're going to make it, right? I mean, it's just simple fact, because we are, as alcoholics and addicts, we are very industrious. We can find what we need. We can find exactly the people that we know to do what we do. We can walk in a room and see them. I can do that now, right? In any kind of social gathering, I could see, well, that guy's probably, if he's not in the program, he probably should be, right? I mean, you could kind of, my radar is still there. It's just for good instead of evil. So the other thing that no one's talked about is there's a nationwide movement called, and it's out of Faces and Voices in DC, but it's called Recovery Community Organizations. And most states have at least one. They're pretty much in the bigger metropolitan areas, but they are, for a lack of a better word, a clubhouse, or you have to be actively engaged in recovery you can't just go hang out, right? There's a lot of peer support going on in these things, and they will direct you to whatever you need, resources for jobs, for clothing, for food, right? Or they have lists of temporary sponsors. You need a temporary sponsor? Call this guy, and there's always a meeting going on in one of these places. So it's a relatively new within the last 5 years, but they're called Recovery Community Organizations, RCO for short, and they're nationwide. All you have to do is Google search RCO in your state, and you're going to find at least one. I too appreciate you, Shaun, for asking me to be here. I really feel like I'm in the company of some solid recovery here. I appreciate both you and both Cody and Shane. I appreciate your stories, and thanks for keeping it real. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Kale. You're starting to sound like one of those crusty old timers, though. When I first started, I had to clean ashtrays. But man, you guys, you guys all said some great stuff. My biggest suggestion is, man, get in there, jump in feet first. I love the saying that give it a try for 6 months. If you don't like it, you can have double your misery back. The drinking and the drugs are going to sit out there. If there's anything in you that says maybe this is for me, just give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst thing that happen is you save a couple bucks because you're not out there spending on booze and dope, and maybe your life gets better. Like Shane said, get in there and don't be afraid. It's a scary thing. I can remember my first time in a meeting. I was 16 as well, and it was scary. I was this little 16-year-old kid whose life was all messed up, and walked in this meeting. It was scary, but the best thing I did is I sat down with two people and said, "Hey, I'm new. I need some help." What new people don't understand is that those of us that have been around for a day or two, we all swarm to those new people because it's the farther I get away from that last drink, the harder it is to remember it. So I thrive on the new people coming in here and sitting down, and it reminds me of what it's like out there. When somebody goes out and comes back in, the first thing I ask them is it better? Because I want to hear that. Listen, I went out there and there's non-addictive drugs out there. There's non-addictive alcohol. There's stuff that I got by. I want to hear that, but I don't. I hear that it's still the same, and that's what I need. So like all these guys, I pretty much surround myself with recovering people. I'm blessed that every day that in my job, I sit in a room full of people in recovery, all different lengths of recovery. And lots of times we talk work, but lots of times we talk recovery. It's pretty cool. The other big thing is there's a line in the big book. We are not a glum lot. My life is fun today. We sit here and laugh. Me and Shane, we laugh all the time at work. I talk to Kale and Cody once in a while, and every time it's like, we can start a conversation laughing, but then we can get real serious real quick. But then we can go back, we can finish off loving and laughing. So like I said, my big suggestion is if there's anything in you that thinks that maybe this is for you, try it. It's easy to find. Just jump on Google and Google Alcoholics Anonymous is in the phone book. Narcotics Anonymous, they're in the phone book. Google recovery near me. AA and NA are the big ones, but there's all sorts of other stuff. There's Heroin Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, recovery Dharma. There's Smart Recovery, all sorts of stuff. Grab what you think works for you and try it. And if it doesn't work, just like Kale said, try something else. Try a different meeting. Try a different fellowship. And if I see that there's somebody who's dealing with a loved one that they're going through this, my biggest suggestion to you is be there, be supportive, but protect yourself. Work on yourself. You can't make that person get sober.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my wife, I think part of the reason why when I got sober, we started drifting apart. She went to one Al-Anon meeting and said it wasn't for her. I really truly believe that this is a family disease. And if one person gets sober, the other person has to work on themselves as well, because it's that dynamic between, and that's what Al-Anon does. Al-Anon is the 12-step program for the non-alcoholic family. Am I saying that right? So yeah. If you have a family dynamic that alcohol was involved and it's taken away, alcohol and drugs, that dynamic is still there. And just because the one person is working on themselves, if they don't work on themselves, I am a testament to that. My marriage went right down the crapper because of it. So you brought up the person about having a loved one. So
yeah,
it's my personal experience, anecdotal. So.
Well, it's Kale's right. It is a family disease, and unfortunately, those of us who were the active alcoholics and addicts, we're the ones that get the most help. But our loved ones, our wives, our family members, they struggle too, and so many times they don't go get help. So yeah, there's Al-Anon, there's Nar-Anon, there's CODA, there's all sorts of stuff for people who are just involved with the recovering person. So yeah, This was great, Brian. Thanks for asking us to do this. Kale, Cody, Shane, thanks a lot for being in here. Thanks for being part of my lives. And we could keep going on forever at this, as you can tell, but I'll turn it back over to you, Brian.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to y'all. As a former social worker and someone who hasn't struggled with, drug addictions, but definitely have my own fair share of demons, it doesn't matter necessarily what you're struggling with. We're all fathers on a journey, and we're all in different spaces. And the more we can lean on each other and say, like, you know what? Sometimes society says I got to be all that I can be for my kids, but there's definitely days where I wake up and I'm like, I'm not at 100% today. And guys in the dads with daughters community, dads with sons communities, like, we just step up and we're there for each other, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a community, you're pretty lonely. So appreciate you all for those resources at the end. We had plenty of guys watching and listening. So thank you all. I'm sure we can get you all back, and we got some ideas to keep more support coming to all of us here in the Fathering Together community. So thank you all out there that was listening. If you have questions, if you want to reach out, please shoot us a note at Fathering Together or info@fatheringtogether.org if you're on the emails, and we'll get you the support you need. And Shaun will give me some resources to share as well. So have a good night, everybody, and thank you all so very, very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.